guys? Welcome to the latest edition of Your Money, Your Life, our take on all things financial wellness. We got the perfect guest for this conversation, given everything we're going through right now. We're dealing with anxiety, stress, pressures, economic, health. You got the pandemic, you got the fallout from the pandemic, and then we have what we want to do for our families and households in terms of maintaining financial wellness and maintaining the long-term economic and financial health of our families and households. With me is good friend, great brother, Delvin Joyce. He is of Prosperity Wealth Group, LLC, and a financial planner at Pruco Securities, golfer, Family Feud, but...
Come on, we weren't gonna bring that up.
We weren't gonna bring that up, but when you see him with Steve Harvey, he's a great guy. He's a great guy anyway. Don't worry.
I've had better performances. I mean, from my couch, Family Feud is a lot easier than it is in studio with Steve.
It's true. Listen, Delvin, welcome to the show. Thanks for taking the time to join us. Just to set things up, talk a little bit about who you are, what you do, and why you do it, and why you are very passionate about this idea of financial wellness, not only professionally but personally.
Well, first off, Alfred, thanks for having me. I am a longtime listener, first-time caller, so I appreciate this opportunity to be here. Again, I am a financial planner, which means that I truly help people develop strategies and a blueprint to accomplish whatever their hopes, dreams, and aspirations are, or to mitigate their worst fears and nightmares.
Well, again, you're perfect for this conversation because we are balancing both of those. On the one hand, many of us, many households, some are doing better than others, but others are having some really tough times, are dealing with their worst fears and nightmares in terms of paying for college, paying the mortgage, meeting basic expenses, financing retirement down the road. So you got that on one end. On the other end, we're worried that our dreams and hopes are at risk if not lost altogether. And one of the things that's the most valuable thing by having a financial planner, and that's why I tell people this, is it's really making sure that there's somebody to kind of handhold you, not let you get carried away with your anxieties, but also have a realistic expectation of what needs to be done today to make sure that your dreams for tomorrow come true. It kind of helps you manage both the two things that are most important on the show, your mindset and your emotional responses to the financial challenges you're facing. So talk to me about what you're experiencing as a planner, as people navigate the emotional and mental states that they're going through in this current environment.
Well, I love everything you said there. And I think the main thing, what I tell people when you hire me to be a financial planner, you are essentially hiring me to be the CFO of your financial situation. And I can promise you, we're going to make better decisions collectively if you hire me for that role than you probably would otherwise. The big challenge, as you know, Alfred, is that many people have competing priorities, right? And so if you are a working American, then chances are your expertise and your priority is making sure that you do a good job at your job. You don't really necessarily have time to plan for your retirement or to figure out what college looks like for the kids. You are managing the day-to-day. And so where a financial planner can come in is someone that can help you to, obviously figure out, the day-to-day portion of it, but make sure that you're also allocating resources for those long-term goals. What I'm seeing right now is a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, and just a lot of uncertainty. And what I think this pandemic has really taught us is that we're all pretty vulnerable. I mean, I don't care how successful you've been or how much money you've made. If there's a global pandemic that blows through and puts millions of people out of work, that's going to trickle down through the entire economy and likely affect you. So, that uncertainty is something that is pervasive right now throughout the country.
You make a really strong point about how it really affects everyone. Obviously, if you're in a lower economic strata, it's hitting you harder, it's hitting you faster. But I tell my friends all the time, I don't know very many people who actually have extra money. Like whether you make $200,000 a year or $40,000 a year, anything that impacts your income or your expenses can cause a crisis in your household. And a big part of financial planning is anticipating those crises and having a decision-making framework for now. Now we're in the middle of this adversity. We're in the middle of the crisis. And those who already had a decision-making framework in place before this are faring better than those who are now scrambling to make some choices. And like I said, you got competing priorities.
Well, you are absolutely right. And one of the things that we often see in, behavioral finance, I'm really passionate about this because I think if we don't understand, our relationship with money and why we make certain decisions and at least have an awareness, then we are going to continue to make those same decisions. And one of the things that we look at in behavioral finance is something called recency bias. And I'm sure you've heard of that, but recency bias is essentially your bias in your thinking that the most recent outcomes are going to continue, right? So we've been in economic prosperity in this country over the last 10 years or so prior to this coronavirus pandemic. So a couple of years ago, if I'm planning with someone and I'm saying, hey, we really need to establish an emergency fund, that's 6 months of your expenses, just in case you lose your job and you're not earning an income, we can continue to pay the bills. 2 years ago, Alfred, because of recency bias, we're in a prosperous time. People didn't necessarily heed that advice all the time. It's like they couldn't imagine not having a job and making the level of income that they're making. And so what I'm asking people right now is, we feel the vulnerability that we all have because of coronavirus. Internalize that, process it, and remember this, because to your point, we will get out of this, but we all have to remember how this felt and make sure that we're making good financial decisions for when we come out of it.
You're echoing something that a good friend and entrepreneur, Randall Pinkett, BCT Partners, many people may have known him for winning The Apprentice several years ago. He said this about entrepreneurship, but I think it applies to what you just said. He said that they had to train themselves as entrepreneurs in terms of managing through crisis to plan for crisis when they were perfectly comfortable and everything was fine.
Right.
They had to create an internal sense of urgency to plan for the crisis so that when the crisis came, they'd be prepared. Again, to overcome that recency bias that, everything's going fine, why wouldn't they continue to go fine?
That's right. That's right. And so to your point, right now, when I'm talking to clients and I'm saying, hey, we need an emergency fund, they're all over it. When I say to people, hey, you need to, before you think about investing, let's make sure that you have life insurance for your family, they're all over it because we all understand that vulnerability, not only financially, but health-wise right now too, unfortunately.
Well, I guess part of the challenge for you is when we're out of this, how do you help people to maintain the sense of urgency around those things? In other words, not everybody, you're right, is thinking about life insurance because they see people getting sick or passing away due to the pandemic and other causes, and they see, I'm not getting the income I was getting, so this emergency fund, I really needed it. The urgency is there now, but isn't a big part of the key is to maintain that urgency for those things when everything is quote unquote over? How do you get people, or what is the challenge of keeping people from relaxing again, back into kind of, okay, it's all good, it's all over, we're fine?
Yeah, so really, really good insight there. So I think the first thing is with our existing clients where we have relationships, we're trying to train these muscles, right? Just you're an athlete, right? You're a bodybuilder. So we have to train those muscles. So we're training people to say, all right, well, we're putting X amount of dollars away right now. Let's continue that. We've trained that muscle. You build that habit. And just remind people that things can go bad. Now, I guess this most recent downturn in the market and the economy will serve as a reminder, and we will just continue to remind people that, hey, remember, with coronavirus, the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, that's kind of worn off, right? We can't really use that one anymore because people have just forgotten about it. They forgot the pain and all the anxiety they felt with people losing their homes. But now with this most recent one, we just have to continue to remind them.
Well, I tell people, and you talk about, you're an athlete as well. And you
Former.
played for that great,
Former.
great franchise, the New York Football Giants, the only one that matters. But,
That's right.
but, you know, but one of the things about adversity, and I tell you about adversity, I call it resistance, whether it's weight training or other things, is you are training muscles that if you maintain that training, your past quote unquote crises will help serve you in current and future crises. So, you know, I tell people right now we're dealing with a global pandemic. It's a rare crisis that literally is impacting every human being in the world. But we have national crises such as, you know, an economic recession, or, you know, we have personal crises, a divorce, the death of an income earner. So this crisis muscle that you're talking about learning to build and develop habitually in good times and bad will serve you down the road, because this will pass, but other things will happen. Life happens.
That's
Actually,
right.
crises that these muscles are important for.
I
Let me ask you
love that.
something about the. I'm sorry, you want to jump in?
I was just gonna say I love crisis muscle. Can we coin that? Put that on a T-shirt, and it's the Alfred and Delvin thing. I mean, is that?
Sounds like a plan, bro. Sounds
I
like
love
a
it.
plan.
Crisis muscle. We got to build a crisis muscle. All right, I'm sorry.
No, I want to also get into this mindset of in the middle of crisis, which we're in now, both as a nation, as individual households and families. It's very. I mean, I think you touched on it earlier. You're now focused on the urgent. I got to pay the rent this month. I got to put food on the table, and I got to educate my kids at home and decide whether to send them back to school. And a lot of times, while that has to be addressed, we will sacrifice the long-term decision making, the long-term planning that still has to happen, insurance, emergency savings, and other things that, again, right now you could say, no, right now I just got to make sure I can pay the rent. But those other things are still going to matter in terms of your long-term financial wellness through future crises. Talk about balancing the urgent, which is what happens to happen now, versus the important, which maybe doesn't have to happen this second, but you got to do something about that even now to make sure it's there later.
Yeah, I think that underscores the importance of just having an overall plan. Because if you have a plan, then you understand what resources need to be allocated for now. You can address your actual long-term objectives and properly allocate resources there intentionally, right? Not just I'm putting 5% of my 401k plan because my company matches 5%, or I'm doing 10% because Dave Ramsey says do 10%, but you are intentionally putting money in your retirement plan based on your specific retirement objectives. So once we have allocated resources for now, we've properly allocated resources towards those long-term goals. Now we understand how much of the pie is left over for some of those other things. And I think to your point, what typically happens is that people do not have a plan. And if we're flying by the seat of our pants, as soon as crisis strikes, then we feel like we've got to start robbing Peter to pay Paul. Right. So we stop our retirement plan contributions to make sure that we have money for today, or so on and so forth. And so, again, having a plan will help you to understand where you should be pulling those resources, and making sure that everything is still on track.
You know, I find another important part of the plan, or having a plan, is that even if you do have to change the plan in the short term because it was urgent, and I'm thinking about some of the choices I made during the Great Recession.
Yeah.
There were things, you know, I reduced my contribution to my retirement plan, my 401k, because of short-term urgency. But because I had a plan, I also, when that urgency passed, was able to go back and adjust it back to what it was, and even put a little bit more to catch up. Whereas
Yeah.
you're operating without a plan, that doesn't, you just kind of, like you said it and you forget it, and you don't remember, well, the crisis is over. Why haven't I gone back and readjusted this back to normal levels?
Yeah, I always say if you have a track to run on, it's easy to hop off of that track and then hop back on. And I think that's the most important part. And I don't want to minimize, I think, some of the pain and suffering that a lot of people are having right now. I understand that all that is real. I do think there are some things that you can do to mitigate some of that. And I guess we'll get into that as we have the conversation.
Yeah, I definitely want to do that. But before we do, I want to also ask you about this. You know, and part of the thing that I always want to drive home on, I do on this show, is the need for financial planning and the need for professional financial planners. It's something that's been part of the Black enterprise message for decades.
Yeah.
And as you said earlier, it's not that you may not be, maybe you are smart enough to do it. You know, people are like, I know what, but you don't have time to do it. You have, like you said, you got a profession, you may have a family. It's like, you can't be your own doctor. You can't do your own surgery, and you can't do your own taxes. I mean, you can, but you're not going to get the best result. So talk about two things. One, the fact that you are dedicated to this long-term planning for your clients, so they don't have to do it. They don't have time to do it. And two, the idea that a lot of this is managing their emotions. And because you are somewhat detached, I mean, you care about the outcome for them, you're not going to react the way they're going to react when it's like, oh my God, I can't retire. Or, oh my God, my kids aren't going to college.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you said a lot there, and I'm going to try to unpack some of it. But the first part, I think, is working with a professional. You know, to your point, you can't be your own doctor. You can't be your own attorney. I think there's an old saying: anybody who represents themselves in court has a fool for a client.
Yeah.
Right. I think in a lot of cases, you know, the financial wellness industry is sort of the same way. But we have Google, and so people can easily go on Google and Google these financial terms. But I'm telling you, having a professional to have oversight over your entire situation to make sure all the pieces are working in concert is invaluable. And the other part of that conversation, you know, there is these terms that are used interchangeably, right? Financial advisor, financial planner. People, I think, use those terms interchangeably. And the way I would draw the difference, because I'm a big fan of financial planning first, right? Because if you were to go, you know, I used this earlier, if you were to go to a financial advisor, let's say, with your hopes, dreams, and aspirations, or worst fears and nightmares, that financial advisor is probably going to give you some sort of product, right? As a solution to your worst fears and nightmares or your hopes, dreams, and aspirations. But if you were to go to a financial planner with those things, that financial planner, him or her, is going to give you a strategy and a blueprint, non-product specific. And so typically what I'll see is that I'll encounter new clients and they've accumulated a bunch of products throughout their life. They got a mutual fund over here that they got from some financial advisor. They bought insurance from an insurance agent over here, but nobody has actually sat down with them to put it in a cohesive plan. And that's where I think the huge benefit of working with a financial planner relative to like an insurance agent or a financial advisor.
You know, I'm so glad you said that. I want to emphasize that point. What people need is a plan and a planner. That's the financial planner is literally like the quarterback. Okay,
right.
Here's the game plan. Now, how do you execute the game plan? You may go here to get one thing and go there to get another thing, but it's the plan that people should be paying for. Because if you have the plan, then it almost doesn't matter whether you quote unquote do it on your own investing on yourself online, but you're following a plan. And you're right. There's so many people who are financial advisors, financial professionals who may be very legitimate at what they do, but they're not planners. And I think that's critically important. The other thing that I think is important, and I'm guilty of this, I've been a financial journalist, business financial journalist for now 35 years. I know you. I know all the best people in the space. And I was one of those people for the first 20 years of my adult life. Was like, I don't need a planner. I know this. I write about this stuff. I interview people about this stuff. I know Delvin and I know Cheryl. I know, I got the best experts. And the bottom line is my knowledge could not translate to an effective financial plan, in part because I don't have time.
Right. That's right.
You underestimate what it takes to put these plans together and to really understand, and not even to get into the fact that changing laws and regulations, and the compliance challenges that happen to you, every year you got to upgrade your education level to be ready.
Well, and here's the other part too. So what I've typically seen is we are all our best advocates, right? Like I am going to give myself a pass. You're going to give yourself a pass on certain things. You're not going to see all of your blind spots. And even if you do identify a blind spot, you might give yourself a pass. You'll say, oh, well, I can put money on that credit card, but I'll pay it off next month. Working with a financial planner and an actual professional that's someone that's going to hold you accountable. And so we all resist accountability, right? I mean, I work with a financial planner myself only because I understand that I will give myself a pass. And so I think that's the most critically important part of this.
So yeah, let's jump into what you already foreshadowed earlier, and this is what can people do now and it's not about, okay, everybody in the audience, a doctor can't on TV tell you what to do with your health.
Yeah.
That's an individualized plan, an individualized diagnosis, prescription, recommendation. So, I'm one of those people, because I'm into business journalism. I'm sure you get it. People reach out to me on Facebook or Twitter. What should I invest in now? And I'm like, dude, it's not. I don't know you. I don't know your situation.
Right.
So let me just say that. But I would like you to talk about what are the things that people in our audience can do now to mitigate the stress, the anxiety, the fears that many households are going through. Some, especially some that are really in crisis. That can help them find hope for a brighter future based on some of the things they can be doing now.
Yeah, so I would separate the two people that I'm going to talk about now into two different categories. So let's assume that there's a group of people that may have suffered some financial hardship, either reduced hours at their job, or they've actually lost their job, or an income earner in the family has lost income due to this pandemic. The other side of it would be people who it's business as usual, but they still have the fear and anxiety because of what's happening, right? So first and foremost, if you have suffered a financial impact from this pandemic, the first thing I would say is you're going to incur debt, right? I mean, it's almost unavoidable. If you already have credit cards, you're probably paying bills on credit cards. You're probably buying groceries on credit cards. Well, the first thing that I would say is make sure that you are at least trying to utilize whatever credit card or whatever personal loan option you have that has the lowest interest rate. Because at some point we're going to be past this and you're going to be back to work, and we don't want to have a bunch of debt accumulated on a 29% credit card, interest rate credit card, when maybe there was another option available to you. Right. So that would be number one. Number two is I would figure out ways to tighten the belt. Like we all have pork, I call it pork, in our budgets that we can trim out. And no matter how much you think you don't have pork in your budget, like things could be super tight, I guarantee you there is something in your budget that you can eliminate. Alfred, you probably know this, but one of the fastest growing industries in this country right now is uncanceled, unwanted subscriptions.
Yes.
I'm going to say that again. Unwanted, uncanceled subscriptions. Because we all have iPhones, we sign up for some app, it gives us 3 months for free, and then after the third month is going to start charging us $3.99 per month, or we sign up for some TV streaming service that was free for 2 months, then it's $10.99. I'm telling you, I literally went through my budget last month and I found $128 per month that I was paying for subscriptions that I wasn't even using, right? And so we all have those. So look at the budget and really figure out how to get as lean as possible until we can get on the other side of this. I'd say for the people who are actually, business as usual, their jobs are continuing. The main thing there is we're all saving money right now, right? We're not spending as much because I don't know the last time you ate inside a restaurant, but it's been since March for me, which means I haven't had to tip anyone. I'm eating out less. We're traveling less. My car now gets 3 weeks to the gallon, right? So I don't have to buy gas. And so what are we doing with all that extra money, right? If you're saving money, your income hasn't changed. Are you actually allocating that money towards your emergency fund so that once we're on the other side of this, you're okay? Or are you spending it? Are there more Amazon packages showing up? So I think the main thing, Alfred, is just to really reevaluate the budget and make sure you get as lean and intentional as possible with where your funds go.
On for both of those groups, you again just underscored again why I'm so passionate about having a plan in the first place. And let's take the person for whom their income hasn't dramatically changed. They've been fortunate enough to still have a job, to be able to work from home. Maybe they got the kind of work that just is not impacted in the same way as other people incomes are impacted. If you don't have a plan for what you normally spend, then you're right. You'll have spare income, but it won't feel like spare income. Then you'll just spend it. You won't even know that you're saving money. And I always tell people, when you go shopping, if everything was on sale, why'd you come back broke? Like if you don't have a plan, a budget to capture the savings and bank the savings, earmark the savings that I'm going to put extra in my 401k, I'm going to put extra into the emergency fund to build that out beyond the 6 months in case maybe down the road I am asked to be furloughed, or I'm, But if you don't have a plan that you're operating by, you'll be saving money, but you won't be saving money because you spend it before you realize that you have it.
That's right. Well, we like to say financial planning is telling your money where to go rather than asking where it went.
Oh, say that again.
So financial planning is telling your money where to go rather than asking where it went. And, one of the challenges I have in my practice is that most of my clients are first generation wealth, right? People that may not have necessarily grown up with money, didn't grow up with that role modeling with respect to money with their parents because their parents didn't have money, and they're not going to inherit any money, right? They are first generation wealth. And the challenge is that if you are like me, I'm first generation wealth. I wanted Nikes. My parents bought Sykes, right? But if you are like me, I grew up knowing what it was like not to have all the name brand things. I grew up knowing what it was like not to have all these things that are symbols of wealth. And what I had to learn about myself is how that started operating in my decision making financially. I started as I matriculated into wealth personally. I started acquiring all these status symbols to let people know, hey, I've made it, right? And so the challenge I have is that I want my first generation wealth clients to enjoy their lives because they may have grown up wanting and not having. So you have to enjoy it. But to your point, Alfred, I want to make sure that we have, developed a strategic plan and a budget so that we know what's left over for you to buy that Louis bag, right? Or for you to buy that Tesla or whatever it is, because I want you to enjoy your wealth.
One of the positive outcomes of a very difficult situation, which is the pandemic, that again I've echoed through the interviews I've done since March, both for this show and my other show, Beyond the Hype, is that we're far more sensitive to what's really important to us versus what we thought was important to us. And I tell people I can have everything I want because I know not to say yes to everything I can have.
That's right.
So yeah, we all have our real passions. Those things you may want to splurge on the latest kicks. You may want to splurge on a really nice car. My thing is I spend money to pursue this natural bodybuilding thing. I tell you, this is not they don't pay me. No matter how well I do, I pay them. But that's my passion. And my thing is, if you're really hold yourself accountable for not spending on the nice to haves, like the things that but you're not passionate about it. This is nice to have. Then
Right.
You have plenty of money left over both for the things you need to have, and those one or two things, whether that's golf, travel, that you really, really, really love. And the things in the middle are the things that eat up all your money. You don't need it, but you're not really that passionate about it. But without a plan, you kind of money just, like you said, you ask where it went.
Yeah. Well, I ask my clients to put everything through the social indifference lens, right? So we talked about behavioral finance and how do people operate with money. You probably already know this, but social indifference is your ability to be indifferent to what everyone else has.
Yes.
One of my favorite books of all time is The Millionaire Next Door.
Oh.
You love that book, right? Studied millionaires. He found that these millionaires weren't extravagant people living in fancy houses, driving nice cars with boats. They were just the average person next door. And the number one trait was that they had a high level of social indifference. They didn't really care about trying to keep up with the Edmondses, right? And so I'm not saying don't buy nice things. I'm saying put it through the social indifference lens. Are you buying that for you, or are you buying it for everyone else? Right. And if you do that, you'll make better decisions.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. One of the things that has saved me, I didn't think it was a great thing when I was in high school, but it saved me over the years, is that I was liked in high school, but I wasn't part of like the quote unquote like popular crowd. I wasn't peer pressure
Right.
driven as a high school kid. You know, I could appreciate what other people had without me having to have the same things. You know, so
Sure. Yeah.
that I don't know if that made me, you know, very happy as a high school kid. Because everybody wants to be popular to some degree, but it served me well over time because a lot of times, like, you don't have the latest thing. I'm like, well, I don't need it. That's not.
I wish I could say that. I was not that kid. I mean, I remember my first job. I got a job at Food Lion, and I would work for 2 weeks, and I was a bag boy. And the bag boy had to bring in the shopping carts in the hot sun, right?
Right.
I would work for 2 weeks. And at the end of that 2 weeks, I would take my $135 check. I would go to Belk, and I would buy Tommy Hilfiger everything, down
Right.
to the socks. And my whole $135 is gone.
He was Gucci to the socks.
Gucci to the socks. And so had someone told me about social indifference back then, you know, I would have made better decisions. But unfortunately, you know, we all live and we all learn, right?
Well, let's end this conversation. Again, this is about long-term financial wellness. I mean, so we want to think beyond this crisis and even beyond our own selves as a generation. At Black Enterprise, we talk a lot about what it takes to create a culture of multi-generational wealth in our families. What should parents be modeling and showing their kids, you know, ranging from little kids, obviously the teens, the young adults, many of whom are really going to be, you know, irreversibly impacted by what we're going through right now.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
this is the COVID generation of kids coming through right now. They're going to tell stories about, I had to go to school on a computer. I couldn't go to class, or, you know, my mama was in the house working in her job while I was on the computer working. You know, they're going to be impacted by this the way some people were impacted by 9/11. Maybe an early generation was impacted by World War II. What do we tell our kids and what do we model for our kids about healthy financial behaviors going forward for them and their children?
Yeah, that is a really tough question. I would say that our kids are watching right now and they are paying attention. Even if you don't believe they are, they are taking notes. So I would say first and foremost, look at the way you personally spend money, right? Are there 4 or 5 Amazon packages showing up on the doorstep every day? If they are, then what you are modeling for your children is that it's okay to just go online and spend a bunch of money, right? And so just make sure that you're being intentional with that. How are you shopping for your groceries right now? What does that look like? Are you buying in bulk? Are you using discount stores? Or are you know, what does that look like? And then finally, I think, and this might be a little bit of the 201 version, Alfred, but I think finally it's, what are we talking about to our kids right now with respect to the stock market? Right? I mean, the stock market and the S&P 500, you know, took a bath back in March, right? Lost 30%. Now, to your point, when things are on sale at the store, people go in and buy up the sale, right? But when things are on sale in the stock market, people run away from it. It's the only place people run away from a sale. And so one of the things that we did with our own children is we took the time to educate our kids on the stock market. We said, here's what a stock is. Here's what it means to own a stock. If you own a stock, you own that company. And our kids were fascinated by that. And it started with a conversation that I had with them in the Starbucks drive-thru. I said, hey, I own that company. What do you mean, Dad? Well, I own their stock. And to own that stock means I'm an owner of Starbucks. They were fascinated. And so now we've helped them to build their own portfolios, so to speak. And we're talking to them about what it means to invest in the market and what that looks like. So we're having healthy conversations.
You know, that's so important. I did the same thing with my kids when they were growing up. They're all adults now. You know, they each had shares in Burger King and Disney and things like that, things that they were interested in.
Yeah.
But one of the what seems like a contradiction of the economic fallout of the pandemic is that while yes, the stock market took a bath and that was a time to catch stocks on sale, it has recovered because the stock market always does.
Always does.
And so there's not a correlation between what we may be going through economically and what the stock market does. You know, the reality is when you're not in the stock market, you take the economic hit when the economy, you know, falters, but you don't get the benefit of the rebound because you're not in the market.
Right.
And we see that, you know, Black and brown communities, lower income communities that are not invested did not enjoy even the rebound from the Great Recession because we weren't invested from an ownership standpoint. It didn't benefit just people who were workers, only benefited people who were owners. So I think that's a powerful, powerful lesson that this is a great opportunity to teach our kids that, listen, one of the long-term plans that can help you through crisis is that the stock market is resilient. I mean, it's going to have its bad periods because that's what it does, but it's very resilient when you talk about long-term wealth creation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Listen, Delvin, you know, I could talk with you forever because you're a cool dude. By the way, this is also one of our BE Minor Men of Distinction. Those of you who know our campaign to celebrate Black men of excellence and leadership. You're just, you know, you provide such great advice from a really genuine place, but with top-notch expertise, which is the you know, the combination that Black Enterprise loves and our audience loves. Just as a final word, what would be kind of a final word of encouragement to everybody who is struggling? You know, again, health issues, economic issues, income challenges, unemployment. You know, I always tell people there's not always an answer, but there's always a reason to remain hopeful. And a lot of your work is helping the people to remain hopeful in periods of their life when they feel anything but.
Yeah.
You know, what are you telling your clients that are struggling? What are you telling people in general who are not your clients who are struggling and anxious?
Well, my dad's legacy, what he gave me is that I am an optimist. You know, my dad, I blame him for that. And one of the things that I learned from him is that tough times don't last, but tough people do. And so the challenge is, don't feel like you have to do it alone. You know, seek help. Work with a financial planner, work with a financial professional, work with a personal finance expert, reach out to someone and try to get some help because there are people that will meet you where you are. And I think the misconception is that you've got to have $1 million in the bank to work with a financial planner or financial advisor. And the reality is you do not. People will meet you exactly where you are. So that would be my last word.
You know, you just brought up something that another guest on this show, Angela Yee from the Breakfast Club, said on when we interviewed her. She was like, the misconception is you got to be rich to have a financial planner, but the truth is when you don't have a lot of money that you really need financial planning. And if we get that message out, that is when you think you're not ready, when you think you don't have enough, when you think you got to wait for your situation to get better, that's when financial planning is most valuable, and that's when you should get it.
And if I can say one last thing, like what I often see is that, you know, I don't know if you have someone that comes in your house and cleans up, if you have a housekeeper, but people who have like someone who cleans their house, they typically clean their house before the housekeeper gets there, right? Have you ever seen that?
I've seen people do that.
And so I meet people and they say to me all the time, they say, well, hey, we want to work with you. We just need to clean up some stuff first and then we'll start working with you. And that's the analogy that I use. You know, if you're going to pay me to come in and clean the house, let me clean the house. You know, don't try to do it before I get there. So
yeah, because you're not there to be impressed. You're there to help.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So like you go to your doctor, you don't say, let me get the perfect health before I go see my doctor.
You got it. Bingo.
You're going to the doctor because you need help.
That's right. You got it.
Yep.
So
listen, man, thank you for being our guest on Your Money, Your Life. Got to have you back on. Just always great advice, bro.
Well, listen, man, I have always admired you and looked up to you ever since we met in Minnesota several years ago, or Minneapolis. So appreciate all the work that you guys do at BE. And it was a pleasure being on this show.
No doubt. This is Alfred Edmond Jr. with Black Enterprise. Thanks for joining us for Your Money, Your Life.